Welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 4, Episode 9. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
All right, and in this episode, we've got a fantastic guest, Richard Armour, Senior Vice President, eCommerce at the Michaels Company. Now, you put Richard on my radar screen. How did you know of Richard?
Well, we connected a while back on LinkedIn. I don't even know that I remember exactly how, but Richard's kind of like you and I in that we have been at this e-commerce multi-channel thing for, a couple of decades. So in addition to Michael's being a really interesting company, I just love talking to folks that have been at this for a while and can kind of give a perspective of how we got here and kind of how to separate what's real from perhaps what's just kind of those famous clickbait headlines. So.
Yeah, a real veteran. Everyone's going to enjoy the conversation. And what I found so interesting, amongst other things, is how ready, so to speak, they were for the implications and the impact of the COVID era. Like they were going already in the direction of many of the things that you and I talk about. So anyway, we'll leave that for the listeners. But first, let's talk about news of the week. You sent me this note. Buckle up, Buttercup, which is all about, inflation numbers are, inflation in the U.S. hit, a 40-year record. And of course, we have the dark, dark cloud above all our heads right now of the Ukraine war. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I think coming into this year, we certainly knew inflation, supply chain, there are going to be some narratives that were just going to be with us for quite some time. So that's obviously very challenging. But yeah, we're starting to move into, I think, a whole new era here with the implications coming out of the war in Ukraine. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Yeah, the other thing I had seen about, everybody's very focused on gas prices, of course, and that is a big deal. But also, I didn't realize that so much wheat came out of both Russia and Ukraine. And I suspect that's going to be more of an issue for Europe than it is for other parts. But, when you think about just all the tentacles to how inflation is going to affect our lives. But I don't know. There's still part of me, maybe easy for me to say, but there's still part of me that says it's a small price to pay relative to what the folks in Ukraine are going through. Yeah. But it's buckle up, baby, because it's going to be a wild ride here for some time.
Well, and I got two quick comments. One is if anyone wants to understand some of the agricultural food implications of what's happening, tune in to the Food Professor, my food podcast, because we talk about fertilizer, and it's actually the implications are more deep than just wheat. It is where the fertilizer comes from. Hint: Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. So it's a very interesting story. And the second thing I'd say on, if I could put a positive spin to any of this, I was talking to a retailer and we were chatting. I said, after the past 2 years of the COVID era, where you've had to really realign your organization to be agile because we just can't predict what was going to happen in the future. And we were more thinking about, next waves of COVID. Are you better off today than you were in 2019 to handle what's coming and the shocks that you're experiencing? And the general consensus was, absolutely, in a weird way, right? So in a weird way, COVID prepared us for more uncertainty. And boy, we didn't want this kind of uncertainty, but it's here.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
All right, let's talk about Kohl's Investor Day. You've got some, let's talk about, there seem to be a lot of suitors that they're up for sale. There's some numbers. Talk about what you're thinking about Kohl's.
Well, we could probably do a whole episode on what's going on at Kohl's and some others. But yeah, they've gotten, as we've talked about in the past, they've gotten a lot of interest from activist investors and potential acquiring companies and maybe splitting off e-commerce and all this kind of stuff. But this past week, they had their Investor Day where they laid out their strategy where they are no longer going to be a department store, but a active family lifestyle destination or something.
We are declaring we are not a department store.
No, and I am not overweight either, because I said it.
It's true.
And it's there'll be a piece up on Forbes that I wrote before this episode comes out. But on the one hand, I think it's a very interesting, cohesive presentation. it looks a little bit too much like a board presentation I did at Sears 20 years ago. So I have a little PTSD about that. And you can make your own conclusions from whether this is really a presentation that's going to rock the world today versus what may have been a good thing to have started 10 years ago. But it makes all the sense in the world, I would say, at one level. I don't know the senior leadership team at Kohl's, but the people that I know that know them all well say great things about them. So that's very positive. On the other hand, the truth is Kohl's has really been stuck in the water for several years now. Their sales in 2018 were $20 billion. If they hit the number they're guiding to for this year, they will do $20 billion. So amid all the talk about all this new traffic from Amazon, all these brands like Land's End, Tommy Hilfiger, et cetera, they've added, the Sephora rollout, you go through all these initiatives the past 2 or 3 years, and if it all works out, they'll be back to where they were 3-4 years ago. So, I just think that there's a little bit too much high-fiving about this strategy so far. There's a lot that has to come, and so whether it turns out to really be a breakthrough for them or just kind of, my favorite term these days, slightly better version of mediocre, we shall see.
Right. Well, the next couple of things on the list reminded me of something I think it was Metallica. The rich get richer and the poor get the picture, or maybe that's Bob Dylan. But the stronger getting stronger. The results from Ulta and Dick's, they're fantastic results. And we're going to talk about some profitless prosperity. But let's talk about results from Ulta and Dick's.
Well, there were a ton of earnings this week, and as we say, we're not trying to make this a current events podcast, but I would say the overall takeaway is what you said, that if you look at some of the players that have really been doing well for several years, it's kind of more of the same. Great sales, great profits. There's kind of this interesting phenomenon we talked about last week about kind of this rebalancing that's going on where e-commerce, most of these guys are reporting e-commerce being down year over year, but strongly up compared to a couple years ago. So, I think we're just getting to this point where the players that really made as you were talking about earlier, the players that made the investments, and we'll talk about more in a second about Michael's, those that were really innovating going into COVID, have really been able to pick up market share.
Yeah, right on. Well, let's talk. Speaking of investment, I just want to touch on something that happened here in Canada. We've talked about Canadian Tire before, great retailer here in Canada. They announced this week a $3.4 billion investment in their business, everything from improving their digital, but a lot into stores, a lot into systems. So, 10-to-1 ratio, that's like a big U.S. company investing $34 billion. So it made the news, and I guess it continues to just following up on what you're saying, I just thought of it as another example of an organization that gets it. And hey, retail.
It almost makes Target's $5 billion that we talked about last week seem puny.
Let's talk about this. Let's finish up on this list: profitless prosperity for the disruptors. Stitch Fix, ThredUp. Stitch Fix had a terrible week, but I think there's some other news. Talk about that for a bit.
Well, we've come back to this. We had an episode on this last season. Talked about it in the context of predictions, but it's these disruptor brands that continue to grow quite nicely, in some cases pretty spectacularly on the top line. But not only are they having a hard time being profitable, it actually looks like it's getting worse. So we heard this week from Stitch Fix, ThredUp, I think the week before from The Real. Poshmark, I think, also reported. And the story pretty much across the board is sales up, profits getting worse. The thing that because I did write a Forbes article about it this past week, the thing that I also pointed out was that here we are in this period where there's been this significant acceleration to e-commerce, and generally a period where people were fairly reluctant to go to the stores. And you think that would be enormously beneficial to these type of companies. And yet in that kind of perfect storm of dynamics, they have not gotten on a glide path to profitability. Some of these will certainly make it through, but I don't know. I continue to feel like the heat is really going to be on for some of these brands to kind of put up or shut up.
Well, we have no doubt which one Michaels did, because you're going to hear from Richard Armour the story of Michaels and his background. So let's get to that, and we'll see what happens when it all comes together and gets executed super, super well. Let's hear from Richard.
Well, Michael and I are delighted to welcome Richard Armour to the podcast. Richard, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
Hey, doing great, guys, and happy to be here.
Well, we're excited to talk to you about a lot of different things, but we love to just start out each podcast having our guests just take a minute or two to tell us a little bit about themselves, their professional journey, and what their current role is at Michaels.
Yeah, sure. So, if you guys could see me, you may not believe this, but I've been in the e-commerce space since the early 2000s. So. I've been doing this for a while, and I came right out of business school. I joined a company called Sabre, and they at the time owned Travelocity. So I just essentially went right in to the world of e-commerce, and it was something that when I was at Travelocity, we were just really focused on how do you get people through the checkout process when buying airline tickets. Like, that was my focus. Doesn't sound very exciting, but I learned a ton. I was in a product manager role, and just really, I'll say, kind of cut my teeth coming out of B school and just kind of what does it look like and what does it take to really convert a customer. So and I was there, and I was in I worked on a bunch of different products for about 5 years or so. And then I left there, and I went to this smaller company called Handango. So not to be confused with Fandango, but at the time, Handango was selling smartphone apps before the iPhone. So that probably dates me a little bit. But that was really cool because, again, this is like mid-2000s, and we were selling smartphone apps. And so got to just really see a lot of what the mobile experience what worked well and what didn't. And especially in those days, the mobile experience was, as you guys can probably remember, it was a mess. So learned a ton there, wore every kind of hat imaginable in the e-com space since it was a small company, and probably made every mistake under the sun. But it was a lot of fun. And then I left there and was at GameStop. And was at GameStop for close to 10 years, focusing on everything from digital marketing to really focusing on just launching all of our omnichannel programs. And there it was really interesting because there was always this pressure of being disintermediated. But that was a really cool gig. And I'm a gamer myself, so just had a huge amount of fun there. And then for the last 2.5 years, I've been here at Michaels. And here at Michaels, I'm focused on really what we can do with both our site and our app to drive our business, but to drive it profitably. And so that's really been the focus. We've got sites in both the US and Canada. As you can imagine, every channel you hear about, we've launched it. It's out there. So BOPUS, curbside, shipping from the fulfillment centers, same day delivery, ship from store, drop ship, you name it. But really my focus here has been at Michaels is how do we do all these things, but do it the right way so we don't add more friction for our customers and also for our team members, because we've got these 1,200 stores. So how does all of that kind of just work together? So I know that's a mouthful, but that's kind of been my journey. But I've been kind of lucky and happy that really since my post-MBA career, I've pretty much been in e-commerce.
Well, that's a pretty amazing experience. Now, most of our audience is in the US and Canada, so I suspect just about all of them know about Michaels, but we do have quite a lot of listeners outside of the area. So could you just give us like the 30-second snapshot of what Michaels is about for people that might not know?
Oh, yeah. So at Michaels, we are the largest arts and crafts specialty retailer in North America. So if you think arts and crafts, so you're thinking canvas, you're thinking yarn, we offer those products. But here's the reality, and this is something that, we're so much more than that. And what I found here at Michaels is, we serve teachers, entrepreneurs, those folks with their small business, as well as the fine artist. And so we have this assortment, this growing assortment, both online and in store, to really be that one-stop shop, for that maker. And for us, we're really just trying to help folks bring their dreams to life, whether they're just getting started in crafting and making, or they could be an expert, a true artisan, or anything in between. Is what we try to do here. But in addition to that, we do classes. So you may not even need to be an expert. You may not even know what you're trying to do. So we do classes both online and in store. So for that real novice maker, we have something for them as well.
Well, thanks for that. When my kids were quite a bit younger than they are today, it seemed like I was going to Michael's about every third day, but maybe not good for your comp store sales. We want to definitely dip into all your digital e-commerce omnichannel experience, but I understand that in addition to kind of your regular job, you've also taken an active role in Michael's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Can you just briefly tell us a little bit about what Michael's is doing, what your role in that has been?
Yes, and I've been so proud to be part of this, Steve. So when you walk into our headquarters, the first thing you're going to see is a sign that essentially says, "Everyone belongs at this craft table." And that really is who we are at Michael's. And so the good news is when we kind of look out, is we want, whether it be our assortment in store, our employees in the store, or at our support center, we want to make sure that we're reflecting the community. And we also want to make sure that we are as inclusive as we can possibly be. And so as part of that at Michael's, we've got eight actually. We've got 8 employee resource groups. I'm in one of them called BOLD, which is essentially for our Black organized leaders of diversity. That's what that stands for. But the reason I'm so proud of that is, as I've grown up in my career, and especially I find in e-commerce, sometimes there can be, a lack of diversity at times, especially the higher up you go. Michael's has really taken I'll say, this to heart, and we're really just kind of looking at our landscape and just trying to understand what can we do to really increase the diversity for the overall company, and everything that we can do to support our makers, like I mentioned. So you will see assortment in our stores. We bring in assortment, for Black History Month or Women's History Month, where we're sourcing that product from smaller businesses, diverse businesses, those things, getting visibility. When we do marketing, we're getting marketing and driving awareness and visibility for these diverse makers. And it's just something I'm so proud of. And it's a really cool thing to see as it continues to evolve.
You've been in e-commerce as long as I have, actually. I launched Hudson's Bay e-commerce back in 2000. So great opportunity to ask you, as you reflect on what's transpired in e-commerce over that time. I mean, some things is, what's old is new again, right? Suddenly we're talking about in-store pickup and curbside. These things have been around for a long time. They probably got accelerated by the COVID era. But as you reflect on the evolution of e-commerce over your time, talk about that experience and how it folds into your efforts at Michael's.
Right. No, it's good. I think what I would say first off is it's a lot harder now. Like I've realized. So when I first started, it was really, we were kind of just focused on, okay, how does your conversion look?
Right.
Are sales growing? Are you profitable? And, today those bread and butter metrics, I mean, they're still important, but, as I look at it, it's, we're also looking to see, okay, are you focused on supply chain? I will tell you this. And of course, we all know about some of the recent supply chain challenges, but just more broadly, especially if you're at a retailer that has both a physical and online presence, really optimizing around supply chain is critical. And that's been an area that is incredibly complex. And so, that's a piece of it, whether also inventory management, because as we've kind of gotten to this place where it's no longer just the product you have in your fulfillment centers. You have this natural, I'm going to call it inventory contention between, what's in your store for a walk-in customer, but then also what's available for buy online, pick up in store or curbside or also ship from store. So inventory management has also gotten much more complex as well. And I also just think operationally. So it used to be where I could be, not necessarily siloed, but we could work up our e-commerce plans and sales and look at what the outlook would be without really having to think through all the implications at the store level. But now, and especially at Michael's, with the majority of our online orders being fulfilled by stores, there really has to be much more collaboration, planning, and then also just understanding, are you adding friction, not just for the customer, but for the team member to really fulfill these orders? And so, I would say it's just gotten much more complex. And the other thing that really stands out to me is it feels like everything is table stakes now. It used to be where you would do something like, I would say, oh, we got this really great new personalization algorithm that's bringing up better product recommendations or product reviews. Well, now that's yesterday's news. That's just expected. You need to have that. We can talk about, BOPIS or curbside or same day delivery. Hey, that's great. But the customer kind of expects that now. So again, I think, everything is table stakes. So it's gotten a little bit harder to really truly find and understand, okay, what are those differentiators? And then how do you hold on to them? Like, how do you hold on to them and kind of put maybe some walled garden around it? I think that's just gotten a lot tougher and it takes a lot more strategic thinking. And I think more of a long-term view than where it used to be. Heck, probably just I'll say 8-9 years ago.
It's so many great points. I want to pull in a couple of threads. You've mentioned a couple of times your focus on the associates, right? How do we make their jobs easier, more simple, not more complex with all these fantastic ideas that we come up with? And this whole idea of table stakes versus differentiators is such a moving target, right? So it kind of segues me into the next question, which is, thinking about the experience of Michael's during the great acceleration or during the COVID era. Did you experience that movement where you had the vast changes of demand and patterns have ebbed and flowed? And do you think it's changed that pattern for good? I mean, really, you play as Michael's, you play in that trying to figure out positioning, I guess, on any given day between being very efficient, as you said, create less friction for everyone, and then being very experiential, right? Room at the table, craft, events, hosting events. And how do you work through that? I guess it's a long question. There is a question coming here. How do you work through your thinking of what just happened?
It's a real challenge. And so first off, let me talk a little bit about the pandemic. And we were by no means isolated in this. We saw I will call it probably the most accelerated growth I've seen in my career in the shortest amount of time. But what I will say is, the good news was, and I'm so glad at Michael's we'd already been doing this, is we already had several of the programs already in place. We were already investing in all these programs, and I'll just call them omnichannel programs, but you guys know what I mean, whether it be ship from store, whether it be buy online, pick up in store, those existed before COVID hit. So I started in 2019 in September at Michael's. We had already mapped out what we wanted to do to update BOPIS. We had mapped out 30 friction points for both the customer and for our team members. So it was a lot. It needed a lot of help. Yeah. So we just attacked that thing, and we were making major strides and starting to see nice improvement in our survey, Net Promoter Score. And then COVID hit. But the good news is we'd already been making those investments and making things better. And then when COVID came across, we said, okay, well, we've been focusing on BOPIS. One of our next items was curbside. So we had not launched curbside, but then we'd already mapped it out, though. That was the good news. And so we were very able to very quickly and rapidly roll out curbside nationwide to all of our 1,200 stores, including Canada, which was fantastic. And, we'd already had ship from store. And this was probably the thing that was just so powerful for us, because we were able to essentially scale from, we had about 300 stores to all of our stores doing ship from store in just record time. And I remember the hard part in that was making sure we had enough cardboard, of all things. But we needed to make sure we had enough packing material.
Supply chain.
We weren't having to write processes. We weren't having to scramble on, well, how will this work? And so all of that was mapped out. So the good news is we were able to rapidly accelerate launching those programs. And then as we've moved, and I'll say, quote unquote, past COVID, we've really spent time refining those programs now. And so, and it's really great. Like I fully believe that what we saw during the pandemic accelerated us probably 18 to 24 months, maybe even more. But what we've taken from that is, okay, these programs are here to stay. Like, so, and we also launched same day delivery. And I've had one of the customer feedbacks we got was someone said, the only good thing to come out of COVID was same day delivery. And I was like, oh, that's probably that's a lot of hyperbole there.
Yeah.
Hyperbole is the greatest thing ever. So let's not just hyperbole.
Yes, but really good to hear. And I think it really emboldened us with these programs. So I know there's a lot there, but we have really, I think, I'll say that we were already under this digital transformation. We accelerated it, but it just continued to build on this hypothesis. And we were able to grow the business and grow it profitably. And while it was a scramble, it was not a scramble on what to do. It was just a scramble on how do you take this and scale it was really the thing we were focused on.
You know, I've talked to retailers who have gone through a similar. I haven't talked to very many that were as prepared as you were, but they also said that the volume actually was helpful because, you know, it's hard to do a couple of deliveries to the parking lot a day. It's actually where you can dedicate the process and really work through the process when you get 200 orders going out to the parking lot. Did you experience that as well?
That's exactly right. No, I'm glad you mentioned that. So this was also probably one of my proudest moments at Michael. So one thing I love to do is to go and visit stores. And so I was visiting these stores up in Cleveland. And one of the store managers, she came up to me and she said, you know, Richard, during COVID, it was this amazing thing to see because, and they're in this massive parking lot, guys, like where this are the stores. And she said, Richard, we had so many cars lined up in the parking lot for their curbside orders. And she said, not only that, Richard, but we had so many shipped from store orders coming in. She's like, Richard, we were able to keep our folks working and busy. And she goes, I remember I would take a bite of my sandwich at lunch. And then it was, okay, quick bite. Okay, pack this up. Quick bite. Let me run this out to a car. But I took a lot of pride in that because, you know, we kept people, you know, gainfully employed. We met the needs of our customers. And to your point, it was that scale because we just saw so much of a shift of when it was foot traffic before, you know, now it was folks in their cars or it was folks that we were using our stores as miniature fulfillment centers. But it all really worked together, but that scale helped. And also, but you got to be careful with that scale because if you have some things that are wrong or that are eating away at your profitability, you can really take it in the shorts. So
the problems get big faster, basically.
Hey, Richard, I have just go back for a second. One of the things Michael and I have talked about on the podcast a few times, in fact, we dedicated an episode to it, is this question around why does it take a crisis for many retailers to innovate? It seems like when I think about what you just described, what Target, Best Buy, Tractor Supply, there were a few other companies that ended up doing what you did, which was accelerating their journey, but they were doing a lot of the foundational things before COVID. And I'm curious, what was it about the Michael's culture or process or what you went through that made those things a priority before a crisis? And then I guess thinking forward, what are those foundational pieces that will keep you hopefully on the leading edge of digital transformation or whatever we want to call it?
Right. I think before, and this was a really good thing. And again, when I started at Michael's, there was no needing to sell in the fact that we needed to transform how we were thinking about digital in this company and meeting the needs of our customer. Like that was already sold in completely from the CEO down. And so when you have that, there was a recognition that all of the programs could be improved and there were resources behind improving it. So I think that was really helpful because I've been in situations where you almost have to prove there's a problem. So the good news was we were growing our e-com business, we were growing it profitably, and there was recognition that it could be so much more and it was already ingrained. So it was already an initiative for us when we looked at just growing our digital presence, but doing that with the stores also because our customers just see us as Michael's. They're not seeing us in these channels, but we knew we had a lot of work because the net promoter scores were so bad was we were already bought in. And then we had that momentum. We were already making those enhancements. And then with COVID, it took away for lack of a better term, noise. Everyone knew exactly what needed to happen. And so there was this singular focus. So when we were rolling out same day delivery, it could be things where it may have taken a few weeks to maybe align on something, where here it was hours. It was a meeting. It was a quick phone call. Okay, this is what we're doing. Here's how we'll price it. Maybe we will get it wrong. If we get it wrong, we will iterate. So I think it was also this environment where it was a crisis where it really reiterated, it's okay to fail. Let's just move as fast as we can. And don't get me wrong, guys, we made a ton of mistakes along the way, but we just iterated just so quickly to get it right. And we knew we had to move quickly. So I think when you have that, when you've got the support of your executive team, good things can happen. And that's exactly what we saw.
So when you think about what's next, so we've got this world, obviously, the blurring of the lines or the hybridization, I like to call it, between digital and physical, and how the role of stores is changing, which you've described, media networks, the metaverse, losing some of the third-party data. As you think about what you are worrying about, working on next, what would you offer up and what kind of guidance might you give to our audience in terms of the things that you think will be most critical going forward?
Because there's a lot there, Steve. I think, as you look at it, and again, I'm a pretty old school guy with some of the things I say, so you'll have to forgive me. But I will say, as whether it be NFTs, metaverse, whatever the next big crypto is going to be or any of that, I feel like it's really important to understand what your North Star is and who you are. So what I mean by that is, and especially I'll just say within the Michaels world, we're trying to grow e-commerce, but we want to do it in a way that it makes sense for our customers, where they're happy with what happens, but that also we do it profitably. And so, and I call that out because that's really important because, as you do these things, it's really important to measure performance. And because there's going to be a lot of these things that come up. And I think it's really wise and smart to dip your toe in these things, test them, iterate, and then just measure it and understand, because maybe you'll start and something won't be profitable and you can look to say, well, hey, maybe this will end up being a big traffic driver for us, or hey, maybe there's FOMO. You just don't want to miss out on this. But I really think it's incredibly important to test these areas, but make sure that you're measuring your profitability. And that's why just, in our own world at Michaels, we kind of slice our e-com business down into every fulfillment node and just measure the profitability of it. And then as new things pop up, let's do that and measure it too. And know not all channels or initiatives will be created equal, but just get in there and test and try these things out, because you just don't ever know what the next big thing is. And the other thing I will say is try to go in with as few biases as possible. It's really easy, I think, when we have all this, and I'll say even for myself, having done this since the early 2000s, to come in and have like this biased approach or think better. A lot of times I like to go in with just a very blank slate and just, be very open, because I have found things that didn't make sense before make sense now. Things that used to make sense no longer make sense. And just listen to what the data and the customer tells you. And then that should always guide you the right way. But no, there's probably going to be a few bumps along the way to get there. That's for sure.
I love that. And I think that a lot of great advice in there from a person with a tremendous amount of experience. So I think we'll have to leave it there for today, though there's always more we could talk about, I'm sure. But thanks so much for joining us, Richard. If people want to learn more about you, learn more about Michaels, where's the best place to do that?
Steve, it's pretty easy. I'm on LinkedIn. So again, my name's Richard Armour. So just go out there on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active out there. And then from a Michaels standpoint, we also have a very, I'll say a very pronounced and we're very active on LinkedIn as well. And you can also come to our website. So michaels.com, check us out there. We've got a lot of information on what we're doing, and just stay tuned. We're really excited about what we've got coming in the future from a Michaels standpoint. So keep us in mind. But I will say this, Steve and Michael, it's been great talking with you guys today.
Well, it's been great having you on. Thanks so much, Richard.
All right, thank you.
If you like what you heard, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you can catch up with all our great interviews and insights, and new episodes will show up each and every week. Sure to check out our YouTube channel, and last but not least, tell your friends and colleagues in the retail industry all about us.
And I'm Steve Dennis, author of the best-selling book, Remarkable Retail:
how to win and keep customers in the age of disruption. You can learn more about me, my consulting, and keynote speaking at stephenpdennis.com.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and co-host of the Conversations of Commerce Next podcast, the Voice of Retail podcast, keynote speaker, and host of the all-new Last Request Barbecue Cooking Show on YouTube. And you can learn even more about me on LinkedIn or meleblanc.co. Have a safe week, everyone.